So as the Republican Party prepares for the possible chaos of a contested convention in Cleveland, Donald Trump, the frontrunner, is focusing on something else. He says he wants to make sure 2016 looks nothing like the, quote, boring GOP convention 4 years ago, and says he wants to add a showbiz feel to the thing. Let's talk about it with David Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. The irony to Donald Trump's comments, David, are that, you know, in past years, party conventions have just been sort of a rubber stamping of the, the nominee. This is a year in which there actually could be business to be done at the Republican convention, and Donald Trump says he wants to make it a showbiz kind of convention.
Right. So every 4 years, in fact, there is a lot of business that happens there. But you and I, we focus on the party. We focus on the coronation of the nominee that's already been decided. And so normally the nominee does run the convention. The theme goes according to what the nominee and his team wants. They decide who gets to speak, who doesn't, when they get to speak. Everybody argues over who gets a coveted primetime slot, and it's the nominee and his team that decides it all. This time around, the Republican National Committee, led by Chairman Reince Priebus and his staff, are planning out a convention in which they are actually in charge and where it's essentially all about business. And they're going to have to decide who speaks, when they speak, when do they hold these nomination floor votes, and whether or not, and I think this is something we could likely see if the nomination's contested, I think we're likely to see a debate between the candidates that are left that happens at the convention, likely in prime time, and it'll all be up to the committee to decide how this happens.
But Donald Trump says if he waltzes into Cleveland with maybe not enough for the nomination outright, but he waltzes in with the majority of delegates, he should have a huge voice in how the convention is operated. Will Reince Priebus acquiesce to that?
No, he won't. And let's remember, if he waltzes in with a majority of delegates, he'll be presumptive, and then he'll get to do what Mitt Romney and John McCain before him got to do. If he only has a plurality, it's going to be run by the RNC and Priebus. They will consult, I believe, with the campaigns to ask them what they're looking for, who they want speaking on their behalf. I think they'll let them know how they're planning it out, because the campaigns obviously need to know what to expect, both from a business standpoint and from a messaging standpoint. But I don't think the RNC is going to hand any part of this over to any of the candidates if nobody's at 1237.
But Trump has been calling the system crooked and rigged, terms like that. He's not going to win any friends among GOP leadership doing that. And secondly, I mean, the rules have been in place for a long time, right?
Yeah, for decades, maybe over 100 years. Look, I understand Donald Trump working the refs. That's how I like to describe this, John, where you're trying to explain why you've been losing delegate elections by casting the process as the problem. Where I think he goes too far is that he's not criticizing GOP leaders here. He's criticizing grassroots Republicans that he's going to need, if he's the nominee, to knock on doors and pick up the telephone and do all the mundane blocking and tackling of politics to help him win a general election. And if he insults them and calls them crooks, they're not going to want to do it. I think that's the problem. The other thing to remember here, and look, Trump in Nevada is doing exactly what he's criticizing. His campaign, which is actually relatively well organized in Nevada, is offering to pay travel costs for supporters to go to Reno to the state convention where they're going to have delegate elections. I think what he needs to do is to try and get his delegate team into better shape. That's what Paul Manafort and Rick Wiley are for, and try and do better in some of these remaining delegate elections. But going after the process like this is not going to help. And one more thing that I think is important here. The Republican National Committee isn't designed to channel the popular will of the voters. They exist to try and elect Republicans who are generally conservatives to office, and that's why they have all of these rules, because it's designed to protect the party and its ideological agenda.
Interesting. David Drucker from the Washington Examiner. David, thank you.